Looking through my YouTube analytics, seemingly a lot of you guys want to know what the best low-level weapons are in Phantom Forces. And while I've made a few videos talking about the best weapons to pre-buy and such, one of which I made just a few months ago, I haven't talked about the best super low-level weapons in a long time. And because of all the weapon changes recently, and because a lot of you are also not rank 426,755, I think I could offer some silly, goofy advice to a lot of new players out there, or even to the hardcore players out there who may just not realize how overpowered some of the low-level weapons can be. So in today's video, I have picked out 6 guns, all level 10 and below, and we're going to be reviewing them in order of unlock level, and we're going to find out just how good they can actually be. And as a bonus, I'll even give you guys some low requirement attachment recommendations for the weapons too. Alright, video time. So the first weapon that I gotta go over, and the first weapon I think anybody who's just starting the game should try out, is the level 0 unlock of the MP5K, which a couple of weeks ago, I think probably a couple months ago now to be honest, got a gargantuan buff that just makes this genuinely like top 3 in the entire game for me out of the nearly 200 weapons in the game. Now if you look very, very carefully, you can see this thing has no recoil at all. Just completely stock, nothing moves. Here, I even disabled muzzle flashes. Hopefully this will give you a better idea. Look at that. Completely no recoil at all. Keep in mind, this is with no attachments at all. Now, absolutely incredible recoil stats aside, it does have some other damage stats and such that help back up just how good of a weapon this actually is. Now, first, it does have a base damage of 34 out to 20 studs, which is really not very far. And the damage drop-off is relatively quick, only being able to guaranteed 3-shot out to about 22 studs. It does have a 30-round magazine, and it does have nearly 1,000 fire rate at 900. Now, unfortunately, the range damage is a little bit low at 17, but for the most part, because of its obscenely low recoil, it makes it really easy to even get like some decent range kills with it as well. Generally, though, the MP5K is a fantastic weapon and definitely the #1 weapon that I would recommend for anybody who's just starting Phantom Forces or just wants to have a silly time with a relatively mid-damage SMG that has completely no recoil at all to it. And honestly, even though I said that I would recommend attachments on these weapons, unfortunately for the MP5K, I would say it's best used completely stock. Even whenever I personally run the MP5K with having nearly like everything unlocked on it, I don't use attachments. I wouldn't even use like red dots or anything because I find that red dots just don't quite line up with the recoil the way that the stock iron sights do. Of course, you could still run one if you wanted to, but my recommendation would be basically just run this thing stock. For the next weapon, it is going to be unlocked at the exact same rank of just rank 0, so a completely default unlock, and that is going to have to be the Intervention, which right now the Intervention is as broken as it has ever been. This thing is an unbelievably overpowered weapon, and I just find that there's never a dull moment whenever I have this thing equipped. It is just unbelievably fantastic. As far as the stats go, of course, most snipers are going to have crazy headshot multipliers, which this one is no exception to the rule, guaranteeing a 1-shot out to any range with a 3x headshot multiplier. And with its 1.15 torso multiplier, it also has a guaranteed 1-shot torso kill out to nearly 160 studs, which if you don't know is pretty dang far. It does have a 7-round magazine alongside a 50 fire rate as well, and a stock scope that honestly is pretty decent. Now really the base weapon, again, much like the MP5K, is going to be absolutely fantastic, but if there is one thing that I would recommend changing, honestly, as much as I love the stock scope, it would be the scope itself. And even though it might be a little bit higher in terms of kill requirement, I would say pretty much any scope that you can toggle between is going to be maybe a slightly better bet. So in this case, I'm going to use the PSO1 scope requiring 250 kills because if you press T, it has a really, really solid alt aim. And I feel like it just kind of helps have a little bit more idea of what's around you. And of course, you can always like scope a little bit further in if you'd like to do so. Now, our next weapon here is going to be the MK11. It has one of the oldest models in the entire game, which you can't really tell because of the weapon skin, but you can see how basic the details are on this thing. Now, the MK11 is a just level 3 unlock and is much like the MP5K in terms of being one of my favorite weapons in the entire game for a variety of reasons. Now, of course, like a lot of weapons in the game, that is going to kind of come down to mostly the damage and the recoil. So recoil isn't really something that matters all too much on DMRs because they're semi-automatic weapons. It's not like you're spraying this thing fully auto. The recoil is nice, but also the damage is really high for this weapon, giving you a guaranteed 2-tap torso kill out to 133 studs. And guaranteeing you a 2-tap headshot out to any range at all, and a minimum of a 3-shot kill total. With a 20-round magazine and a 330 fire rate, those things kind of combine together with decent iron sights. It just kind of makes it generally a very, very good weapon. Similarly to the Intervention, the only thing that I would really change about this weapon is I would maybe give it a different sight. The stock irons are good, but I would say something like pretty much any kind of scope is going to pretty much do you pretty well in this. Even something like just the regular PKA scope that you can kind of toggle between the different sights, I think is just fantastic and works very, very well on this for only requiring just 165 kills and probably not many credits. Now, going back to the SMG category, the next weapon that I'm going to recommend to you is going to be the UMP45. This too, much like the MP5K, is a weapon that got a gargantuan buff recently that just made it super, super overpowered gave it a crap ton of damage, and just generally made it a very, very fun weapon. Now, base damage is 45, which is really, really good, and combined with a 1.1 torso multiplier, it makes it just about a guaranteed 2-shot kill, doing a minimum of 99 damage with 2 hits to the torso, out to its minimum damage range of 45, and guaranteeing a 2-shot headshot out to 82 studs. Now, unfortunately, completely stock, the recoil is a little bit rough on this. Hello, sir. But it's not by any means bad, and because it is an SMG, you're probably going to want to use it up close anyway. And when you're fairly up close, recoil like this just doesn't really matter. Now, when you start trying to snipe with it, it gets a little bit more rough though. But for being just level 5, if you want a little bit more power than the MP5K, this is a great alternative. Now, really for this, the only things that I would put on it are like a suppressor and a Z point. I really just like how quiet a suppressor makes this thing. And the Z point is just a decent red dot now after the scope update a few months back. Or is it probably, it's probably a little closer to a year now that I think about it, my goodness. And yeah, you could just kind of get a little bit more range potential out of it, not having to deal with the iron sights. I do genuinely like the UMP. It's a very, very fun weapon. Dude, look at this. I'm actually kind of sniping people with this thing. It does only have a 25-round magazine, though, and a fairly slow fire rate, but if that's okay with you, that's okay with me. Oh, the poor MP7. This poor weapon has gotten so many nerfs and buffs, and it's just in such a weird place right now. But I have been seeing quite a few people use it recently, so it's got to be in somewhat of a playable state at least, and from the little bit of gameplay that I had before recording this, I would have to agree with that. Now, the MP7, being only unlocked at just level 9, has some pretty average stats, I guess. We get a maximum of 30 damage out to 50 studs, minimum of 18 damage out to 140 studs with a 1.4 headshot multiplier, and a relatively okay 1.1 torso multiplier. It has a 950 fire rate, and it has a 30-round magazine as well. Now, the base weapon is okay. I wouldn't quite say that the recoil is the best. I wouldn't quite say it's the worst. So what I'd personally recommend if you're a new player, I'd grind up the 10 kills to grab at least a Z point, and then maybe I'd say it could be worth pre-buying a compensator on this. Yes, it does make your recoil climb a good bit, but after those first 3 shots, you can see it is basically spot on. For the last weapon that we're going to go over here, it is going to be the AN94 being unlocked at just rank 10, and pretty much being the default weapon for whenever you hear the words no recoil. And even though the iron sights are pretty crude, you can see that this weapon has no movement at all to it. Now, if somehow you don't understand the AN94 or don't know what it is, you can see it has this 2-round hyper burst thing where it basically fires 2 rounds pretty much simultaneously, but if you continue to hold left click, it goes down into this 600 fire rate automatic mode. So pretty much if you can hit your first shot, then you basically hit them twice. If you want as well, you could put a suppressor on it. They do only require 30 kills. I'm really not a fan of the sound that the weapon makes, so personally I would. But you can see with just a Z point and a suppressor, this thing has no recoil at all. It is just a fantastic weapon to choose. And while the fire rate might not be ideal to most, I feel like the weapon is good enough to really just make that not matter, especially for being as low of a level as it is. Now, of course, there are other weapons that are below level 10 that are pretty decent, but these are going to be my personal favorites that I would like to choose, and that I'd recommend to anybody who's just starting out in Phantom Forces, or just wants to be silly and kind of use some low-level weapons that are pretty decent. If you guys want, though, I could go back and I could review the other weapons that are unlocked below level 10 as well, if you're curious about those, but that's going to be pretty much it for this video. So, if you guys are new to Phantom Forces, welcome. I hope that you enjoy your stay. I do have a couple of guides up on screen now that you can check out if you are new, or if you're just looking to level up faster, or want to understand the movement for Phantom Forces a little bit better. So definitely check those out if you are interested. Otherwise, thank you so much to the channel members. You guys are awesome. And if you found this video helpful, consider subscribing and leaving a like below to help boost the video in the algorithm. And hopefully it'll help find some other new players. Thanks for watching, dudes. Peace.